if you want to support the show, any of the shows, either this or whichever show, I'm not on right now because this is just a blanket ad for all of them, and the website, you can go to bewareofspoilers.com. In the description for any of the episodes of Beware of Spoilers, there is the option to donate. If you don't want to donate that way, you can donate directly through the website. We do have that, mwpnews.com. And if you don't want to support that way, then going to mwpnews.com will help out because we have ads there. We don't want to keep it, where there's a lot of ads. There's a few ads. But the point is we want to make it so that way, we can sustain this for the long term. If people donate, we're never going to paywall anything, I don't think, as of right now. But if people start donating, we'll start doing cooler and cooler stuff. Like donations are how we get to cover stuff like Tribeca and other, film festivals. And, we may be able to bring on more people to help out. So if you want to help out the show and you want more content from us, by all means, even just going and giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify helps out a lot. But that's it. That's the only ad we'll have on the podcast ever. But here's whatever podcast you're going to be listening to. Good evening, and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam with my handy seatbelt lav mic. This is weird. Today we're here to talk about Bad Boys. I keep wanting to say For Life because it feels like that's a more fitting title for this movie based on the movie I just watched, having not watched Bad Boys for Life. The one that came out in 2020. I don't remember why. It was pre-COVID. It came out in January. It made a lot of money, and then it was one of the highest grossing movies of the year because theaters shut down 2 months later. But look, I think that I've never seen any of these movies, so I came into this kind of blind, and then it's kind of one of those things where it's how does this work for someone who hasn't seen anything in the series before? And I think it works well enough. I think that there is enough explained where it's I need whatever you need to know in that moment is kind of handed to you. Who are the relationships, all of that. You're able to piece it all together if you haven't seen anything before, which is always good. That's something that is an underrated part of telling a story in an established franchise. And they do it well here. So that's good. And I enjoyed that. That's not to say this movie is necessarily perfect or it's something that I would watch again. I think there are fun moments in this movie and some great comedic beats. I think some of the action is really good. Not all of it. I think a lot of it, they try to get experimental and it doesn't always work, which is a shame. Because it just kind of feels weird and kind of hard to follow at times. So yeah. So I think that the big thing that kind of harms the movie, for a good amount of it, is I feel like the general, the plot itself is a little convoluted, and especially when you water down what it is at its core, it's a police corruption story. It is, this guy is dead, he can't defend himself anymore, so alright, we're gonna pawn this all off on him. All of these years of police misconduct and not misconduct, but corruption. We're gonna pin it all on him. He can't defend himself, and then if that, happens, then, what happens here? I think that the issue is it gets too convoluted from there, because it's at times you're but this doesn't make sense. Like, and they point it out, which is the weird thing, where it's like they point out the plot holes in a weird way, where it's like, okay, so he like the plan is, all right, so we're going to backdate these transactions, and we're going to send him to his personal accounts over the course of 10 years, 15 years, tens of millions of dollars. This will create the illusion he's getting paid. And it's like, okay, yeah, but like, over the course of that 15 years, he never spent that volume of money to be able to be like, oh, and that's how he afforded X, Y, and Z. Like, it's a weird thing to try and do, where it's like, so where did that money go if he was getting paid all of that under the table? Like, and then they point out too, it's like, and it's like he put it in his own name. Like, why would he put the account in his own name if he was getting paid all that under the table and didn't want it to be traced? And then there's like, the point where Will Smith and Martin Lawrence end up on the run, because the helicopter goes down. It's like, yeah, but like the forensics is going to show that like the helicopter was sabotaged elsewhere, and also it's like it wasn't his idea to be on the helicopter with his son. That was Ione Gruffield's idea. Like, it was his idea to put him on that helicopter. So like it's just a bizarre thing that like, and number one that, but number two it's like, so no one figured that out. Like, outside of them, it's like no one was like, oh, so clearly he's the one who is the mole. Because, like, he puts them in the situation to begin with. The whole thing is kind of a little weird at times, and it's like, and no one's figuring this out. And then by the time you get to the end where you have him there, it's like, and the big reveal that he's the one, like, oh, who else would have known? It's like, yeah, but like, who was it that pulled the strings to get him on there in the first place? Because when Lowry goes in, like, all I need, and we've talked about this before, the grand planning villain can be great. Your Thrawns, your thinkers, these characters who are, so fearsome because they're not on the same step as you. They're 6 steps ahead. They know what you're going to do, and they've planned for that, and they're ready to go. And that's kind of what this villain kind of felt like at times, where it's like, oh, we know you're going to do X, Y, and Z, so we're going to take, these other things and put them in the way, where it's like, when you do that, you're going to trip over this. And for that to be the case, and for it to be not Lowry, being the one to be like, I'm going to be on there to make sure that no one, like, we can't trust anyone with this, so I'm going to be on there, feels like a major oversight, because it's like, that's the kind of thing where, like, okay, so we have him in jail, we show that obviously even the jail, even like the prison, the prison inmate, the other inmates and the guards are all on the payroll, where they can and will, do what they can to help get this guy killed. Like, obviously anyone can be bought and sold. So if he's like, look, I only trust myself and my partner, like, it's a thing where it's like, oh, so we're just gonna bring him in that way, and then that solves that problem. It doesn't feel as weird. It's just kind of a bizarre choice all around, where you're like, why is he not, like, why is that not the point where they're like, oh, so clearly this guy is the one who is behind all of this? Like, it's such a weird thing where it's like, how else would they have known? And then, like, when they're going through the forensics and they find the phone call, or the emergency help call, where it's like, and they play it back, it's like, clearly this man is not, like, that is not the vocal tenor of a man who's on a helicopter that's being attacked presently, like, by these two guys trying to break him out. Like, and then it's like, but how would they have gotten their guns? Like, how did they overpower these guys and get into the cockpit? Like, there are so many weird questions that get asked that it's like, don't think about it, just move on to the next scene. And it's like, it tries to do a little bit of everything, and none of it really lands. Like, there's that moment where it's like, like, it feels like they're setting up, like, oh, cool, so we're going to get into Miami, and it's John Wick time. It's John Wick in Paris and John Wick Chapter 4, where it's like, oh, cool, so he's going to go in, and now they have to worry about being killed by all these people. It could be one long set piece as we get to this final thing. No, not the case. It never really pays off in a meaningful way, because it's like, okay, so we have these bounties that were put on them, but in the underworld, so, like, are those bounties now called off? Like, did everyone get those bounties, get like, oh, by the way, we're not doing them anymore? It's a weird thing that also feels out of place for this world, considering that outside of that, this feels like a pretty grounded version of reality, where John Wick is this outlandish kind of, this is a, very clearly a world that is entirely bought and sold by the high table and the criminal underworld. Like, everyone is a killer in this world, and that's the world that John Wick lives in. And here you don't have that. Here, this is just like, this is Miami today, and it feels kind of a little bit like, too grounded to have that kind of a plot point. Like, that doesn't really pay off besides getting to see DJ Khaled hit by a car. Like, it's just kind of a weird thing to introduce into the movie and not continue with. And look, it's kind of like and the other thing is, too, in a movie like this, my other problem is, like, I don't think the ending is, like, earned, especially, like, the whole thing with Rhea Seehorn playing the chief's daughter and wanting the revenge on Lowry's son, because Lowry's son was the one who killed him in the last movie, I guess. And so because she's in that situation, and she's like, I want to kill this guy, like, she's taking on everything. And, like, this final scene that happens where Lowry and, like, where he saves her daughter's life, who, after they're kidnapped, like, he saves her life and takes a lot of hits doing it, and she helps them, and they get to, they get to safety, and they're kind of there. Then Rhea Seehorn shows up and looks at him, and is gonna kill him, because that's her thing. She wants to kill this guy because he killed her father. And her daughter steps in and goes, no, he saved my life, don't kill him. And then it's like, the decision that she has there is, like, probably the biggest 180 you can possibly have in this situation as a U.S. Marshal, where it's not, okay, I'm not going to kill you, but you're still coming into custody. It's, okay, I'm not going to kill you, and have a nice life. Good, best of luck to you, sir. Like, it's such a weird way to do that 180. Like, if it was, like, that scene should have been, like, the daughter says, no, he saved me. And then Lowry comes in and is like, no, like, she, don't do this. Don't throw away your life and your career, in the name of revenge. That's not who you are. Like, he doesn't deserve that. And then take him back into custody. Like, that would have felt more in line for that character. Like, and the way you get the ending that they give, him going off into the sunset after redeeming himself, you can't have that confrontation. But because they set up early in the movie that, like, if I see him, I'm putting him in the ground, you have to have that confrontation then. You can't not have that confrontation. And it's just kind of a weird thing to do, all things considered. Like, they wrote themselves into a hole on that, because you can't not acknowledge it, but you also, like, it's such a weird place to put yourself in for this movie that I'm not entirely sure why you wouldn't have taken a different turn on this. And I get why. It's like there's no place to put Lowry interceding like that in this chain of events where it doesn't feel like it's doing something, where it's like putting in a heavy scene like that after the scene where, if you put that after, him confronting the bad guy, the boots on the ground bad guy, and being like, and saving both Martin Lawrence and his wife's life, like, you can't have that scene and then, and then go to, and now here's another, and then, especially considering the way that scene plays out after, you can't have that and then go to this deeply emotional thing, and also, you can't cut up the search with that kind of a scene, and then go on to that. It's a weird situation to be in. And look, I think that, the other thing about this is that it feels like it's taking a lot of things from other movies that, don't quite feel like they fit in properly. So it kind of feels like a mishmash bunch of puzzle pieces. You ever see that picture of, there were these two puzzles that were made by the same puzzle company. And because of that, the cutter works the exact same way. So they took the two puzzles and merged them together into this weird, that's half and half. And that's kind of what it feels like at times. Where it's you get that John Wick thing, where it's okay, we're gonna have the bounties on them, but that never really pays off well. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm thinking this, it's there's a weird thing early on where it's it's very similar to kind of Clerks 3 in a weird way, with the amount that they go into the details of the heart attack that Martin Lawrence has. And I'm okay, this is devoting a lot of screen time early on in the movie that I'm not entirely sure is needed going forward. I don't think you need the, because that's the thing too, is that it's not like he does something that is really kind of profound with it. You get some jokes out of it, but there's nothing really profound out of the heart attack aspect, except for the payoff at the end where he can't die, and it's yeah, because you shoot him in the vest, but I don't think you needed to do that in that scene to get that payoff. You could still just shoot him in the vest and get the scene to proceed basically the same without having to have that the heart attack was necessary. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that was a needed part of it that just kind of is there, and that doesn't pay off well either. The fact that they're don't trust anyone. Okay, and then here are these two cops. Okay, we're gonna trust them now. It's but why? Maybe they explained it in the previous movie as to why he could trust Vanessa Hudgens and her boyfriend. Maybe that's the case, but it just kind of feels kind of weird as to why it's oh, and if you look on this wall, there's a QR code, and it feels okay, so he said not to trust anyone, but these two we will choose to trust. Maybe just they're young and they weren't around at the same time as the corruption, but they could have been bought out after the fact. Who knows? The whole thing feels a little weird. That's where you're willing to be again, inconsistent. And then the action sequences are kind of my point in this movie where I have the biggest conflict about it, and that would be the fact that I don't like to take off points for them trying to be inventive. The action. Oh, and that was another thing before we go on to the action sequences. There's a moment where on the helicopter, right when things start going south, there's the scene where Martin Lawrence figures out something's happening and he's walking around, and I'm oh, this is just the spider sense sequence from No Way Home, when he has the spider sense that the Goblin is waking up and has taken over Willem Dafoe. And he's walking through, and it's that thing where the camera's on him as he's walking through and he's realizing something's up. It's that exact sequence, and I'm oh, cool, I guess, alright. But also, why would you... Whatever, we're not going to keep talking about that. The action sequences are kind of where the movie kind of, is hit or miss, because there are a lot of times where it is kind of experimental, and they do some cool things. There is, if John Wick had the top-down isometric shooter view, in John Wick Chapter 4, this has what I can only call, Doom view, where it's there's an action sequence toward the end of the movie that's a little cool, but it does kind of, wear thin pretty quick. Where it is shot kind of gun perspective like Doom. And I think that, doing it from the gun's perspective is kind of interesting. It's just, we saw a movie do something kind of similar earlier this year with the tennis match in Challengers, and being from the perspective of the tennis ball at one point, And if that's not the case, like, I feel kind of like it's a little weird. Like, it doesn't work quite as well here. And a lot of times the action is shot with the camera moving so much, it's hard to keep track of what's going on. I feel like I'm back watching Plane last year. So all of that said, I think it's good if we wrap this up and give this let's say a 4. Because I think that there is enough interesting visuals in this movie to make it worth a theatrical viewing experience. I watched this in digital. I did not watch it in IMAX or in Dolby. So because I watched it in digital, I would not say that, like, I feel like maybe these actually might look better, but at the same time, with the ultra high definition that comes with those, perhaps it will end up looking a little bit weirder and a little bit, more disjointed. I don't know. I think that there are enough narrative plot holes in this movie to make it feel a little bit not 100% thought out, would probably be the best way to put it. And it is just kind of like, for what this movie is, which is a police, at its core, it's a police procedural, the activity, like the actual case itself is not exactly well planned out to the point where you're like, well, what is going on here? Like, which is a little bit unfortunate. That said, I think that there is enough, good comedic moments where if you need a movie to see in a theater, like, if you want to go next week to a matinee, you stay over a day off, like, this is a good matinee movie. This is a good, let's go Saturday middle of the afternoon movie. This is not a rush out and see it opening night movie. And some of the set pieces are kind of cool. Like, I really like the set piece of the abandoned amusement park. I love the set piece of the art gallery. I just wish that they had done more to make it easier to view those scenes, especially considering you're doing action in those. But that's a good place I need to wrap up for today. We do have more coming up. I have to look at I don't have my schedule drawn up right now, but we do have more coming up this week. We will have more in the near future as well. We are going to be doing, I don't know if I can say I have the game yet. I didn't read the email, so I'm not going to say a redacted, game coming out in the near future. But I may have a code for it in my email. I got to go and look at that a little bit deeper. That'll be over on the backlog files next week. On the backlog files, we definitely have Pokemon. What's it called? Pokemon Dash, and we're going to be talking about the new Hunger Games book this week on 30-minute reviews, among other things. But we'll wrap up there for today, and until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.